everyone out there, and welcome back to yet another episode of your Slightly Mighty podcast. This will be our 10th episode together. My name is Hop, and once again, I'll be your host and humble facilitator. If you like the show and appreciate what we've been doing here, please take a moment to subscribe to the show so you'll be notified when new episodes are released. Currently, a new episode comes out every 2 weeks. Also, if you would like to see the show continue to grow, please don't forget to share us on whatever social media platforms you inhabit. I am not a social media or advertising expert, so your help in getting the word out will make a huge difference. Today's episode features two wonderful area multi-instrumentalists, Stephen Sandifer and Justin Parrish. Stephen is a freelance drummer, percussionist, and bass player, and a current member of the band Danger Muffin. Other groups he has toured with include the Drew Emmett Band, the Delvon Lamar Organ Trio, and the Biscuit Boys. Justin Parrish plays banjo and guitar with a focus on bluegrass and other forms of acoustic music, most currently with the Bluestone Ramblers, Deep Draw, Hot Club of Charleston, and Broken Skyline, the Tom Petty tribute band. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. So wonderful to talk to you both today right here in Stephen's home studio.
Howdy.
Glad to be here.
All right. Well, let's get started. So you guys, please give me the story of how you both became Charleston musicians. We can start with Stephen, actually.
All right. I was born and raised right here on James Island, and my family's fairly musical. My dad's always played a little bit of guitar for fun, and my mom played piano and organ in church when we were really young. And all of my three brothers all played guitar, and I'm the last of four. So when I came around, I didn't want to play guitar. Everybody else played guitar. So I played trumpet. And,
was there a family band?
There was no family band, but I have had a chance to go play with my brother at his church on James Island, which has been really, really fun.
Cool.
Just a couple times to go play bass with him. So I played trumpet in middle school, and 1 year of high school. I wanted to move over to drums, and they wouldn't let me, so I kind of quit and just got into surfing and other things. And then my last year of high school, I pawned my trumpet for a really awful drum set, but I was so happy because it was the first drum set I ever had. And got into drums and went off to college for a year at Clemson and just wasn't connecting with all of that. Came back here and just kind of snuck my way into the music program at the College Charleston, and then ended up getting a jazz performance degree in drum set from the College Charleston. It was a great time to be there at the College Charleston. The jazz program was brand new, and it was just a great scene. Had some excellent mentors, and just got to play a lot of gigs when I was really young.
Any people you would recognize? Any names?
Oh yeah, Quentin Baxter, Charlton
nice.
Singleton, Kevin Hamilton, Tommy Gill, who has since passed, was a really big influence on me. Just so many great opportunities that a drummer in my position now, you probably wouldn't get the call, but back then there just weren't enough cats to play the gigs, and people knew that if I showed up, I would do my best, and I used to take my little Radio Shack cassette tape recorder with me and literally record the gigs on cassette, go home and listen to it and try to fix stuff and get better at it. So they knew I'd work on it, and so I did that and just got a lot of opportunities at a young age to learn on stage. So I didn't learn, I would say I learned a lot more on stage than I did at the college.
Trial by fire.
Yeah, a lot of sink or swim stuff. But it was a great way to kind of come up. And then I moved to Nashville with a band called the Biscuit Boys many years ago. We lived there for 6 years and did a lot of touring with a few other bands after the Biscuit Boys sort of stopped what we were doing.
And who was in the Biscuit Boys? I've heard a lot about them over the years.
Boo Walker on banjo, Scott Simontaki on the mandolin, who used to live, these guys all used to live here, Charlie McCarter on guitar, and Drew Brakey on upright bass, and he was a colleague at the College Charleston in the jazz program. And that was just a fun band. That was my first foray into bluegrass and acoustic and songwriter type music, coming from sort of a jazz mentality. And it really opened my eyes a lot because I discovered just how much I really liked this music, And when I came back from Nashville, that's when I started playing bass, and then started freelancing here again. And then Danger Muffin kind of came along, and now just doing a ton of freelancing and doing some touring with Danger Muffin still, and getting into recording and producing some as well.
Oh, okay. What about you, Justin? Give us the short bio. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Give us whatever bio you want.
Yeah. I grew up really been steeped in bluegrass music. Grew up Rock Hill, South Carolina. My dad was is a fantastic bluegrass guitar player. So I had the opportunity, from a very early age, going to bluegrass festivals and shows, and they would play kind of Eastern North Carolina area, and with all kind of different bands he would play with, and so those guys kind of, just became kind of mentors to me. Started a little bit on the mandolin, but I really loved banjo, even from like 8, 9 years old.
So that's your primary instrument?
I would say that's my first love.
Okay.
Yeah. So, given the season, sometimes I get to play more banjo, sometimes guitar, different types of guitar, other music. But banjo, is really my first love. So I think it was like Christmas when I was 10. I got my first banjo, and just that's all I did, And we lived out kind of in the country. So when my parents would go to work in the summertime, I'd spend, 7, 8 hours just listening to records, learning what I could, playing, showing my dad when he got off work, and do the same thing the next day. And
so he was kind of your teacher too?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and still is. But yeah, I grew up loving bluegrass music, but I really loved being in a choir. I went to Northwestern High School. Elizabeth Mixon was the choir director, and I just fell in love with choral music in high school, and so I went on to study choral ed. I wanted to be a choir director. Turns out I didn't end up wanting to do that. I kind of changed my mind. But
what caused you to get off track on that one?
I love teaching music, and I love choral music, but I didn't see myself being stuck in a public school environment, teaching every day, kind of dealing with all the other peripheral parts of teaching. I knew that's not where I wanted to end up, even though I loved the idea of, being a choral director.
So that was kind of getting in your way of what you really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I got to scratch the itch for years teaching at a local music store, kind of teaching one-on-one, and that was a lot of fun. But I still love choral music. I'm currently a music director full-time at Two Rivers Presbyterian Church in North Charleston. So from time to time, I get to do some of that, but I work with a team of volunteer musicians, mainly play guitar. But what that put me on was a journey of doing all sorts of different things. Getting to do choral music from time to time, having a love of jazz, having a primary love of bluegrass music. And so I'd say, one thing I really get to enjoy is doing a whole bunch of different things.
Okay. You were talking about your dad was kind of like an early instructor for you. Okay, so how does someone learn the bluegrass songbook? I mean, you have a lot of songs, I'm sure, that you can play at the drop of a hat. How does that come to be? Is it something that is handed to you, or is it regional? Is it situational?
It's regional and situational. I mean, I was never really handed any sort of kind of set list, so to speak, to say, hey, here are the standards you need to learn.
Right.
But, every weekend we're going to a festival, or he's playing some little local gig, and I'm just steeped in this music, so I'm always hearing it. Right. Sitting around playing at, jam sessions and stuff, and hearing new songs, and, oh yeah, I've heard that before, go home and work on it. And you kind of amass this language of music, and then everywhere you go, you find more or less big chunks of it being shared.
Jam sessions. Explain that to people who are listening. When some of my audience members hear the word jam sessions, they're probably thinking of whatever it is they're thinking about. But I know in bluegrass, it's a little different. Can you care to explain?
Yeah, and they can be more or less structured, kind of depending on your environment. But one thing that you find in bluegrass that I think is somewhat unique, or maybe more prominent than other genres, is this communal aspect. I mean, you think about Appalachian music, you don't think about someone going to school and studying it. You think about someone kind of learning it, playing it on their back porch as kind of a stress relief and as a communal thing with other family members. And that was really my experience, is hearing songs and just kind of grabbing my instrument and trying to play along with them and figuring it out, just using my ear. So there was never any sheet music, but kind of a common language that was spoken. And that's really how bluegrass music is communicated, is just by using your ear and picking up your instruments and non-verbally learning to speak that same language with your instruments.
Stephen, you care to comment on how that might relate to, I know you said you have a jazz background. Does that kind of strike a note with you anyway?
Well, because I've gotten to do a lot of both of those types of music, a lot of grass and a lot of jazz over the years. You know, jazz is known for having jam sessions and for that sort of verbal sharing of music, but it's just so much more accessible when it comes to string instruments. Go by the fire, pull a guitar out of your trunk, meet some guy with a banjo, you bust them out. You got to have a piano and a drum set and all kinds, you know, to be able to jam as jazz musicians is just a lot harder. And one thing that's very similar about the festivals, a lot of these jazz festivals they'll have like a set with all the names, everybody come out and doing like an impromptu jam session, which is great because these musics are based off of this like shared language, like Justin was talking about. So that's one of the beauties about music, right? That we can meet people that don't even speak the same verbal, you know, language, but we can play music together because we all know the repertoire and know the rules. But the bluegrass festivals, people just pick and pick and pick. And there's the fans come and they go to their campsite and they pick. And
it's the parking lot scene there is huge. Yeah.
Chris Thiele's out back playing with a 7-year-old and, you know, 2 novice musicians and, you know, 2 of the most, you know, incredible ones you've ever seen in your life, all just doing it because that's the process. That's like what that music is about. And most of those cats still have that in their heart, you know, and they just want to pick. Everyone wants to pick. And that's how you learn these new songs, because it's interesting how you might go to a jam session in Eastern North Carolina and there will be definitely some songs that we all know, and they're going to pull out some songs too that might be in their little circle. Like, you know how we all go and gig and there's songs that overlap between so many different bands. Yeah. And then you go to a different part of the country and it's like there's those core songs, but then there's also these other tunes that everybody there knows, but you might not know. So to be able to find these jam sessions and learn new tunes like that is awesome.
Well, and one thing I will say too that is pretty incredible about bluegrass, and we can talk about some of the improvisation overlap as well between, you know, gypsy jazz, which I get to play some, bluegrass, trad jazz. You know, there is an improvisatory element to all of those things that's shared. But one really interesting thing about kind of going back to my biography is that as a bluegrass musician, especially growing up around Eastern North Carolina, me being in Rock Hill, that's right below Charlotte, but kind of right on the line there, is that I've gotten to meet most all of my heroes, which is something very, very few, you know, maybe unless you're, you know, super famous, you can, you know, meet a bunch of your rock star heroes. But like every electric guitar player out there can't say that they've met, you know, Eric Clapton or Slash or, you know, Van Halen or something. Right. But as a banjo player, like I've met most of the greats. I've gotten to meet Earl Scruggs and J.D. Crowe and Ralph Stanley and, you know, Bela Fleck. And even if that's just shaking their hand or sometimes sharing a stage or a jam session with them, that's pretty darn formative, especially when you're, you know, a teenager and you're aspiring to, you know, want to be the best musician you can be, and seeing these greats that you're actually just getting to pick with.
And how did you feel about the experience overall? I mean, were they down-to-earth people? Was it one of those situations where you don't want to meet your heroes, or was it?
Yeah, more or less. There may be one or two I can think of that, you know,
give names.
Maybe have had a bad day that day, but you know, I mean, especially me as an adult now, thinking back to when I was a kid, all of these guys were so kind to a 12-year-old with a obnoxiously loud, out-of-tune banjo. You know, I mean, because I think, like Stephen was saying, it's a communal thing where that's how the cake is made, and so that's part of it. Is, you know, you might have 15 guys in a jam session, so it's not like you have to be the star of the show. But you can stand there to the side and kind of learn and hang back if you don't know a song, or really lean in if you're comfortable with it. But that was really formative for me, is getting to meet these guys and who just want to sit around and play music, even after they've been gigging all week.
They've made it, but whatever. That's not why they're doing it. They're
exactly
there to play. Yeah, that's cool. So as you guys are coming up through these scenes that we've been discussing, what are some early things that you learned that kind of have helped contribute to your success as sidemen in this town in particular?
For me, being prepared and having a good attitude will get you hired more than how well you play. And I've heard that as a young person from band leaders that would, instill, they'd see me working hard and they would acknowledge it, and they would, make comments like, I know there's other cats in this town that play better than you, but they don't come with a open mind or a good attitude, or they just don't learn the music before the gigs. Right. And they might play so well that they can get away with doing that, but still they're not contributing as much. So I learned early on, if this is what you really want to do, being prepared and being on time and all those things is just as important as the way you play. Obviously you need to be able to play, but people will give you a lot more rope to learn if you bring those other things to the table. And
what are some ways that you prepare? I mean, obviously you learn the songs, but what does that look like to you?
It all depends on the gig, and I'm as guilty as anybody else as those weeks where you're super busy and you might not do as much as you'd like to. But there's also band leaders that won't provide you with the resources. Like I want to come and prepare because I'm going to have more fun, which means it's going to be more, instead of having your head up the entire time guessing right and left. As a sideman on like a new gig, the first time I ever played with the band, and I don't know where the stops are because no one gave me the song list or anything. It's just a different experience. So I would rather spend a couple hours at home getting prepared to have more fun, be more connected with the band, and just do a better job. It's just better all around. But there are those weeks where you just don't have as much time to put in to things like that. So we all know the little tricks and things of how to sort of fake your way through things when you have to. But yeah, that's, I think that's a good place to start, being prepared, on time, good attitude.
100%. I like to say if you're on time, you have a good attitude, and you're not drunk.
Yeah.
Like you're already.
Now, do we mean currently drinking or actively drunk?
Yes.
Both? Okay. Right. I think that's obviously great advice, though, because people are trying to get in touch with their inner selves through booze. It's probably not the best place for it on a stage, right?
Exactly. And when you're playing good music and you're having a good time, and the beers are free, it's easy to kind of where that line goes from you're just hanging out with friends or where you're actually performing a job. Sometimes those lines can kind of get blurred.
Being professional,
being professional, and that's not a musical thing. That's really any job, right? Is if you show up on time and work hard and have and are nice to people, and and you're honest, and that puts you head and shoulders above a lot of other people. And it has nothing to do with talent, but that's something anybody can do.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot of that from my dad. Like I was saying, is you see someone who's arrogant, who's hard to work with, who's not dependable, and you can never compete maybe with their giftedness musically. Maybe you'll never be able to play like them, but you can outperform them in a lot of other areas. Yeah, right. And my dad told me one time, we were talking about the great mandolin player Sam Bush, who is one of my heroes, and he said, you know what, we're probably never in our lives going to be able to play at the same level that Sam Bush plays. But right now, you can always have as much fun as he's having.
Ooh, that's great advice.
Right now. And so when I'm on stage and I'm struggling and I'm like, man, I sound terrible. I have no clue what I'm doing. They're never going to hire me again. I'm like, well, I can't change my talent right now. There's nothing I can do in the moment. But I can smile. I can have a good time. I can do my very best and sleep well at night. And that really takes the pressure off. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I would add one other thing, too, is volume level. Playing the appropriate volume level for the gig is, I've found to be extremely important, especially as a drummer, but also as other instruments, and knowing how to blend with everybody on stage. And you can make or break a gig with your volume level, or make or break the experience of the other members of the audience by playing too loud or not loud enough even. I learned the first time I took more of a pop gig, and I came from playing a lot of jazz and had to learn how to dig into the drums more. Yeah. And I was like, I actually probably have a harder time really digging into the drums than I do playing soft, because I've made so much of my living playing restaurants and playing acoustic musics and stuff. And I love that aspect of it, but it's also fun to, hit the drums,
Yeah.
But you got to know when it's appropriate to do which.
And you're interviewing two guys right now that play two of the potentially most obnoxious instruments around. A banjo is.
Why do you think you're on the show? I'm kidding.
A banjo is super bright.
Yeah.
It's very, very loud. It can easily overpower most any instrument in your standard ensemble.
Right.
And absolutely drums can do the same thing. So
They seem to have a lot in common to me.
they do.
Drums and banjo and mandolin, like the interplay there. But that's
Very percussive instruments. For sure.
very percussive. I mean, yeah, the banjo is an extremely percussive instrument. But there's nothing better than hearing a track where the drummer is just right where he needs to be, just pushing those things, cracking them. I mean, just driving the rhythm. There's nothing more satisfying. And as a banjo player, I feel the same way. Is there's nothing better than just a ripping bluegrass solo. It's just and that's great. But there's a time to do it, and then there are definitely times to not do that. And really, the musicianship that puts you over the top is not whether you can or can't do that, but knowing when to and when to shut up.
Right. Yeah. When to listen.
When to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys are both multi-instrumentalists. I'm going to change the conversation a little bit around that, because I mean, I was really excited to hear what you thought about it. Because a lot of people that have been on the show so far have been specialists, I guess you would call them, or whatever. What is it about being a multi-instrumentalist that kind of, when one thing does it reinforce the other thing in a way, or what do you learn that way? What is the experience like?
For me, it's each instrument has definitely helped me understand the others better. Like when I first started playing percussion, it was the first time in my life I could stop playing on stage. And like if I was in a moment where I was like,
percussion, right?
Yeah,
okay,
not drum set, but like percussion. And there might be a moment where I'm like, I don't think I need to, like, I think it would be better if I didn't play anything right now.
And you have the freedom to just
exactly, because as a drum set drummer, you basically never stop. And there are arrangements and things where you would, but in a typical gig, like the drummer just never stops. He's just behind every soloist behind, and then takes a solo. Everyone else stops playing. You still solo, you're always playing. So to be able to stop on stage and just listen and take it all in was that first time I did that was like, oh wow, this is neat,
Right.
But when I first started playing bass, I was doing it mostly in acoustic musics where there wasn't a drummer. So I was kind of playing time as well as, having some communication harmonically here and there. And certainly, getting to play the changes and all, a little bit of melody, things that the bass gets into some, but you're still a rhythm section guys, but being kind of taking care of the time aspect of it as well. I mean, in a bluegrass ensemble, everyone's doing that together, but the bass player gets the brunt of it, But then I started getting some gigs with drummers, and it did not take me long to just totally blow my mind on how I had been listening to drummers before, how I thought everyone else listened to a drummer, because now I'm on stage and I'm listening to a drummer and I'm communicating with the drummer in a way from the other side. And it was like, wow, I don't remember any of the fills that this drummer played in the last 10 minutes, but man, it feels good.
Right.
And as a drummer in the audience, I might be like, oh, wow, that fill was so hip, or this, that, or the other. But as a player, I was like, man, this feels good. Or, man, something just doesn't feel right. I don't know why I can't lock in with this drummer. I don't know what's going on here. And so kind of as a drummer, I start thinking, wow, how do I play so it complements everyone and makes things feel better for everyone, for the audience, and then my head just goes all the way there. It's like, I don't even want to play any fill. I just want it to feel good. And then you kind of marry it all together, as the goal. Because part of the excitement of drums too is playing some cool fills, and there's a lot that goes into it. But just to have that experience of standing on the, kind of mirroring myself as a bass player, looking at another drummer, experiencing that, and getting to feel how good it can feel locked in, and then going back and listening to my recordings and finding out I was pushing as a bass player or something, and it's like, oh, this is what it sounds like. It feels like if I'm not locked. So I just learning both, each of them. I learned a lot about the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What about you, Justin?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say is when you play different instruments, what you're trying to do is you're not trying to show off yourself. That's not your goal. You may have little opportunities in different songs, but even think about like some kind of raging guitar solo. If you got a 3-minute song, you might get some 20-second 20 seconds of glory where you can like show off, but you have to fill the space, in the rest of the song. And what that means is you're there to serve the whole song, and you have to look at the big picture and what can I contribute to strengthen the vocalist, strengthen the other, other soloing instruments, or and different instruments do different things. I mean, when we think about, or at least when I think about what a drummer's main job is, it's to set a tone, it's to set a groove. Maybe not an ambiance, but a feel.
Mm-hmm. And that's a feel for sure.
Yeah, and
it all starts with the drums for me, for sure.
Absolutely,
I
drums
listen to what
and
the drums
bass.
are doing, and that's where I start. Yeah.
So if you think like your classic like food pyramid sort of thing, you've got bass and drums at the bottom, setting the tone for everything else that may or may not be above that. And so getting to play guitar and also in different genres as well. But banjo, clawhammer banjo, which is more of an Appalachian style, a little bit more mellow, or raging bluegrass, three-finger style, mandolin, tenor banjo. You have to ask yourself, what am I trying to do to serve the song? And am I just kind of chopping rhythm to like support the overall groove? Am I adding chordal structure to it with strumming the guitar? Am I more percussive? So changing all of those different things. The goal is still the same, which is how am I serving this 3-minute song or whatever it is.
Well, I think that leads us into let's take a break and listen to a song. We'll listen to Big Mon, performed by you and some people. And can you tell me who the people are and what this was all about? 'Cause I seen the video of it, and I was kind of curious as to where it took place. And
yeah, you got Zach from the band Town Mountain. He's playing bass, excellent bass player. Got Swanigan Ray playing guitar, and then another local guy, Derek Deacons, playing the fiddle, and all of those guys being fantastic musicians in their own right. And so we've had some opportunities over the years to play together, and playing just a classic Bill Monroe tune where everybody kind of gets to cut loose and have fun.
Okay, let's hear it. So we're back. I want to talk a little bit about the creative process. Do you guys write songs, or you write with other people? How does that look like in your professional experiences?
Yeah, I kind of think that I don't typically write full songs by myself. I've certainly written melodies, but in my capacity,
so you collaborate with others when you write.
I tend to collaborate. The work that I get now is as a sideman, which means if I'm able to do some studio work, or if I have music ahead of time to prepare, in terms of quote unquote writing, that's writing a solo or writing what my instrument's going to do leading from this one part to the next. So it's kind of mini writing for the song, writing small creative parts, Some people that may not gig and may not play music may think that all of this music is orchestrated out, that every note that every instrument is hitting is pre-planned,
right.
and that's not the case. You have general guidelines that are planned, such as chords, or we build up and then we break and then we pull it back and then we get big again. Those things might be thought of ahead of time, but as far as your individual notes, I mean, you're writing it, you're improvising, you're writing.
That's where your
everything on the
creative
fly.
process is. In
Yeah,
that,
so
how
the
you're
creative,
interpreting it.
Yeah, so my creative process right now, my capacity is, again, like I was saying, serving the song. What does this song need at this moment? Just from my instrument, whether it be guitar or mandolin, banjo, something like that.
And who is? I mean, I don't need names, obviously, but I mean, when you're thinking in your head of like someone that you like to collaborate with in that way, what does that person kind of typify? Like, I guess they're hiring you to come in and put a solo in, or to help finish a song, then, right?
Yeah, I mean, in my capacity, I've always liked being taking something that already exists and like saying, "Hey, well, can we make it better this way?" I'm the tinkerer. I like to take an
so you're looking
idea.
for someone who's going to be open-minded, then, in the partner or the person you're working with.
Absolutely, that might already have general ideas about what they want to do in a song, but don't have the details.
Okay.
I like to kind of put the details in there.
Right. So you like somebody bringing the guidelines.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. What about you, Steven? Same thing or different?
Well, kind of all over the map. Lately, I've really started diving into writing some of my own music, lyrically. And, I started off playing a lot of jazz, playing a lot of instrumental music and loving that music. And then in my kind of right as I was getting out of college, I started playing with the Biscuit Boys, and my good friend Charlie McCarter, the guitar player, started introducing me to all these singer-songwriters, and I just wasn't getting it. Wasn't getting it. It took me probably a solid year of him throwing music at me to finally be like, oh, I get it now. And ever since then, like, songs has just been where it's at for me. I mean, I still love a great jazz jam and bebop, and I love all that stuff. But, when you talk about connecting with people, there's so much that goes into the story of a song and the lyrics and everything. And as an instrumentalist, I love coming up with parts that complement the song, and, the writing I do with Danger Muffin, Dan Lottie, the singer, always writes all the lyrics. I always say you have to sing them, so you got to believe them,
Right. It helps, I'm sure.
And we've all, made suggestions and things, but that's mainly his world. But when it comes to the instrumental parts, we spend a lot of time kind of working on this stuff and writing parts, and it's awesome.
Can you explain what that looks like? I mean, are you trading tracks back and forth online like a lot of people do these days, or are you getting in a studio?
A little bit of that on this last record, but when we all lived in the same town, we would get together and oftentimes we would just record jams. This latest record, we went up to a little house in the mountains and stayed there for 3 days and recorded 15 hours worth of just jamming, and then we'd go back and just listen to it and pick out little parts and be like, oh man, that sounds like it could be a song, and then tweak it from there. And then, even if it started off with this kind of a drum beat, as it morphed into more of a song, maybe I adapt that, and and we all...
Now these jams, I hate to keep interrupting you, I'm fascinated by the writing experience. So when you're doing these jams, are you putting them on a click, or you got them already in Pro Tools?
Usually we're not on a click. We're just we have an in-ear rig that we can just record straight out of.
Gotcha.
Or back in the day, we just recorded on our phones and things.
So you really are just experimenting, no holds barred.
For a lot of the songs, occasionally someone would come in and be like, hey, I got this idea.
Right.
It's more of an idea that's already together, and then we kind of hash that out. But a lot of the stuff comes from just kind of jamming, and, so much of what we do as a side person is either getting cover tunes or someone else's recorded music that they wrote, and trying to copy the parts, and do, obviously put our own voice into it, but trying to recreate something that's already been done, versus when we all get to go in the studio or get into an original project where we get to create parts to go along with the song. It's kind of a different thing. But lately I've been learning how to play some rhythm guitar and some piano, and just writing, it's something you got to exercise, just like practicing an instrument. And I'm just starting that journey, but it's very satisfying and very fun to kind of start finally writing some music of my own. So
that's cool. You got some dates in mind for like when things are going to come out, or you just kind of like just getting your feet wet right now?
Getting my feet wet.
I got you.
I've got a handful of what I would call maybe finished songs, but taking it one step at a time.
Sure.
And now that I got a space, going to start recording some of it and really trying to get into the craft of it and just practice, flex those muscles, practice daily to get better as a writer, because there's so much that goes into it. And, it's so subjective. What makes a pretty picture? What makes a good song? Part of it's just doing it, and putting yourself out there. If you never paint a picture, how do you become a better painter? So you kind of have to start writing songs, whether you think they're good or not.
You got to start somewhere.
And just get them out and get feedback and see how they connect with people.
I think that is an awesome way of developing ideas, is getting a group of musicians together, not just a random group, but a group that you have rapport with. You already kind of know the styles, your friends coming together and just, playing, having fun, being reactive in the moment. And it just so happens that, a phone's recording it or whatever. Yeah. And then kind of seeing what quote unquote magic comes out of that. I mean, you were talking about a painting, and I think that's so interesting. That's like, I'm not going to say it's a bad approach, because I don't think, any artistic endeavor is necessarily flawed or useless. It depends on kind of what comes out of that. But, one way of thinking about a painting, and I'm no visual artist by any stretch. I'm actually horrible. But, one way of thinking about a painting or a sketch or something is like kind of having all of that predetermined in your mind and then getting it out of your mind onto the paper kind of somewhat in one fell swoop, or, and then you can tweak from there. And that's certainly a fine way to do it. But the other one is just kind of literally throwing something on a page and kind of and tweaking it and kind of letting it guide you from there based on, what you're feeling in that moment. It's two different ways to come up with a great piece of art, but it sounds like a lot of fun doing it that way.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of different ways of getting to the conclusion you want.
Yeah.
I think I honestly, my own songwriting, I try to create as many of those avenues as I can. Sometimes it's a voice message on my phone.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's sitting down on my computer, whatever you have at hand.
Yeah.
Obviously. You're saying that you were going to, that you guys went to and did some writing recently. New Danger Muffin album, right?
Yeah, that was a little while ago. So we released a new album back in August of 24.
Okay.
So that was, it was about a year before the album got released, maybe a little bit more than that, where we did the initial, just like, hey, we let's do another CD. Let's just have a writing session. So we went and did that for a few days, and then had a couple more writing sessions. And it was interesting for us because all the previous records we'd kind of really rehearsed. Our philosophy was like, we want to go into a studio and try to capture a good performance. We don't want to be arranging in the studio and figuring out the feels and figuring out what tempo we want to play it at, all that stuff. And also, it costs you money to be in the studio, so we want to be in there as short of a period of time financially, but we also want to be just like performing and getting comfortable and just seeing what we can capture. And this album was probably the least pre-production wise prepared we'd ever been. And there's some magic to that too, because you don't know exactly what's going to happen, and some things happen in the studio that you couldn't have prepared for. And I've been in sessions in the past where you go into a session really, really, really prepared, and there just isn't any magic, and it just is okay. And then you come into another one totally unprepared, and like one track, it's just sloppy and just doesn't sound good. The next track, it's the most magical thing you've ever heard because it all was off the fly, and something you never could have created that by practicing up to it. It was just this moment in the studio. So all approaches are valid. It's just this time, because we're not all living in the same place, it was a little bit more in the studio decisions, And
how long have you guys been a band, if you don't mind me asking?
Gosh, it's been pushing 15 years since I joined the band. And they were around for about 2 years before I was in the band as well. COVID, the band didn't really operate for a couple years and all that stuff, but it's been a while for sure.
That's cool. So you guys have that background. You can work in the same room, distance doesn't matter, right? I mean, you know where you're going.
Totally. We've got such a rapport from so many years playing together. Like we were playing up in Asheville, Brevard area this week. And like Dan, who's living back in Charleston at the moment, will come over this week, and we're gonna just drums and rhythm section rehearsal. Just to grease the wheels.
Yeah.
We're not playing as much as we do, so we'll just play for a couple hours and just check ourselves, maybe run a click a little bit, just to kind of make sure everything's feeling good. And that way, when we get to doing an in-studio performance on Friday, and then a little sort of mini festival on Saturday, we'll feel confident
nice.
And fun, cool. Instead of being like, I'm so rusty,
Yes, I like your concept on the work makes it fun. I think a lot of people don't seem to realize that like the practice part makes the other part the fun part.
Yeah, especially when you're dealing with an ensemble, with a group sound. I mean, we all know those cats that could just show up to every gig and never rehearse, and they're just so good and so dynamic and beautiful people and prepared and on time and all that stuff. And that's awesome. But I got to work.
But not every musician can be like me.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Well, you know what? Let's take a break here and listen to a song that you sent me called "These Golden Chains." You told me the story. You were saying something about earlier, the story of the song. Can you tell me the quick story of the song?
Yeah, so this is one of the ones that was born. It's on the most recent Danger Muffin album. This was born out of that initial jam session. Dan started playing something in 3, and I started putting like a 4/3 kind of beat on top of it. And we messed around with it, and then we listened back to it. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And so then we took it from there and started changing the chords, and then, did different sections and things. But there's a couple places where I very blatantly do like a 4/3 kind of a feel. That was influenced a little bit by a not the 4/3 part, but sort of there's this Brian Blade where he's video where he's playing with Trixie Whitley and Daniel Lanois is producing, and he's doing this really simple thing between the floor tom and the snare drum. And somehow that pops in my head, and so I was kind of trying to work off that, and then this 4/3 thing. And that totally is an example of something that came out of just a jam session, totally unplanned. It was just something that sort of came out that we messed around with for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we kind of revisited it and molded it into a song.
Excellent. Well, let's give it a shot.
Just be enough for us all, and for this I will say I did dream, I did say I hope that life would bring peace of mind, but this isn't the way. In my days, I have seen things that no man and no woman, no child should ever have seen. There were days and there were nights when I didn't know if I'd make it through, but I made it alright. And I know the same, and I hope
thanks a lot for that. Got a couple. This is a part of the show where I like to get into questions from the previous show's guests. We got a couple of them queued up here, and the first one's going to go to you, Stephen. This comes from, well, I'll let him introduce himself. He needs very little introduction.
This question is for Stephen Sandifer. Stephen, I know that when you were just starting out as a musician, that you played a different instrument. A lot of people know you as playing drums. I remember you playing a different instrument when you were in middle and high school, perhaps. If you could expand on that. And then second part, I also know that you had a different major, or you switched majors or something like that in college. And could you relay that story to the public, and just why you did what you did and how that has taken you now literally around the world?
Excellent.
What a question, huh?
Yeah. So I got to start by saying Charlton, I have known since I started at the College of Charleston. It was probably about a year after I started there, where I met him through Quentin Baxter, and he's been such a friend and influence and mentor to me over the years. And, you know, he and Quentin are only Kevin Hamilton, they're all like 4 or 5-ish years older than me, but just enough older and more experienced that they were, and because I started playing so late, they had all been playing for a long time.
Right. Charlton since he was 3, he said.
Yeah, and so they were huge influences, and they were the movers and the shakers in the jazz scene here in Charleston. They were creating opportunities for themselves to play. There used to be this jam session at Clara's Coffee Shop, which is no longer there, on King Street every Sunday, and it became this what you'd call a shed, where the young musicians would go and listen, and sometimes they'd let us sit in and play. The first drum lesson I ever really got, and it was with Quentin, was in that place, because I had finally got the courage up to introduce myself, and he said, "Oh, well, let's hear you play. Why don't you sit down and play?" And I'm just like, "Oh my God, really?" So I start playing, and he's like, "No, just the ride cymbal." And we spent weeks just playing nothing but the ride cymbal.
Interesting.
So I gotta just get that out of the way. Kevin Hamilton and I went to the same high school, went to James Island High School, and we were in marching band for a minute. And I mentioned a little bit about this in the introduction, but I played trumpet. He played electric guitar at the time before he started playing bass, and he was incredibly good back then. But we were friends then. He was a senior and I was a freshman, and I played just my freshman year in the high school band. So trumpet was my original instrument. And this is funny because I had texted Charlton maybe a couple years ago. I was going through some old papers and found all-state listing of all-state band players. Right. And Charlton was for like the 8th grade or something, and I was for 6th grade. Or maybe he was the first chair for all-state for like the senior band, and I was like first chair for the junior band or whatever.
That's cool.
So I was really into trumpet for a while, but then I got braces, and then I just really wanted to start playing drums, so I got out of that. So I still have one. It's sitting in there, and I can play for about 3 minutes, and just my chops are wiped. It is a very physical instrument.
Yeah, it is.
As far as how you had to maintain your chops. So that's
the embouchure, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's sweet of Charlton to mention that. And I think that's one of the reasons why when I first saw him play, I was like, oh my gosh, like, one of the first real concerts I ever saw was a Wynton Marsalis concert in middle school. I taught my mom into taking me. Anyways, love the trumpet. It's one of my favorite instruments. And I went to Clemson my first year of college, and I was engineering as a declared degree, and kind of thought, that was going to be my path. And had an interesting experience at Clemson, but second semester there, I took a jazz history course, which just solidified my passion for jazz. My mom had a boss at the Citadel when she used to work there in the accounting department, who was big into jazz, and she told him, I was playing trumpet and I was big into jazz, so he used to send home cassette tapes of all this jazz stuff he would put together for me. And I used to listen to NPR station. There was a jazz show on every single night. Why can I not remember his name? Guitar player from Columbia that would host that. Anyways, I was big into jazz. And so I took the jazz course there, and I was like, this is really what I want to do. I want to study music. And Clemson doesn't have a music degree. They have the football department, so they have lots of money. They have a beautiful music building, and they have scholarships for horn players and things. Right. but they're just
for the band, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
but there wasn't like an opportunity to play drums or anything. And there's not, not a lot of places to play up there. So there just weren't any opportunities. So I decided to come to College Charleston. And it took me a while to sort of weasel into I was told when I first got there that it's college, you're supposed to already know how to play. And I didn't know how to play. So I just signed up. I read the fine print on the little booklet they give you that you could sign up for the applied lessons without being a major.
Right.
And just pay
I did
the
this.
lab
I did
fee.
similar actually in
Nice.
college. Yeah.
So I did that and took a semester with the classical percussionist Chalmers Hawes, who was the principal for the symphony at the time. And then Quentin ended up becoming an adjunct professor his last year of college. He had not even graduated the College Charleston yet, and he was already an adjunct professor because he was that good.
He's amazing.
And so much to share. He shared so much with me. That was one of the beautiful things about coming up when I did was just all the generosity from the older musicians and all the opportunity there was. And I think that's still the way it is here to an extent,
There doesn't seem to be a lot of like competition like that.
Yeah.
here. There's a lot of gigs for everybody here.
Yeah.
I've talked about that on the show with other people too.
Which is awesome.
It's a pretty positive environment here, I think.
Yeah,
on my
we
part
totally
anyway.
encourage each other, and I always think it's like playing a game of tennis with your buddy. Like you want to win, right?
Yeah.
But you also don't want your opponent to break their leg and do awful. You want it to
Right.
be a close game. You want to have fun and
Well,
just
I do.
it's really more about playing the game than it is who wins, right? And it's
Right,
like the
right.
same way with
Yeah.
gigging and it's like we want
Right.
everybody to do well and we want to have fun playing with each other. And if we're both taking solos, we want to lift each other up, not tear each other down. Which
Right.
is a great scene here for that.
So
I do
what year?
think-
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, having been down here for about 15 years, one thing I do love about the Charleston music scene here is I do feel like there's a camaraderie.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a disconnect between more of the electric bands because I kind of live primarily in the acoustic world. But of all the different bands I play with, it's not so much these 5 guys have this band, these 4 guys have this thing, there's this trio over here, there's this other quintet. It's, I don't know, 30, 40 musicians that are all kind of swirling around, doing different things all together, sharing gigs, sharing space. I get to play with a bunch of people, and that's a really fun dynamic here. You're not trying to crack into, wait till a bass player drops out of this one hard to get in band, and then now you get a chance. It's, hey, you know what? They hired this guy for this gig, and you'll get it the next one. And it's a lot of fun because you have this big community here of guys where everybody kind of knows each other. Everybody has played with other people, which is a lot of fun.
And you might go through like seasons with a band where you're getting first call for a while, and then for a while you start getting more work with somebody else. Now you're second call or third call, and it's all good though. We're all friends, and it's all good like that. And it keeps us all on our toes and interested.
On your toes, too. Yeah.
Back in the day, there were a number of like house gigs in town, and one that I used to play 5 hours a night, 3 hours a night, 3 nights a week, and another one where I played 4 hours a night, 4 nights a week. And you're playing basically the same repertoire every night. And that has its perks. You set up once and you're there for the whole week. There's a lot of perks to it, but then you got to find that way to make the music interesting, that you're playing the same stuff every single night can be challenging in its own way too, of keeping it interesting,
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to question number 2. This is going to go to you, Justin. Like I said, he'll introduce himself better than I can.
This question is for Justin Parrish. This is Papa Robbie, and my question is, if you could collaborate with any artist, alive or dead, who would it be, why, and what would you create?
Wow, that is an awesome question. That's really thoughtful. And I have an easy answer. I could list, a million of my heroes and people I respect for different things. But I will say that my hero, since I was 8 or 9, my musical hero has not changed.
Okay.
I'm 37, so
Mine has. I went from Geddy Lee to a lot of different a lot of different areas.
my big number one, guy that I like to fanboy over has been Bela Fleck.
Okay.
Since I was like 8 or 9, and that hasn't changed. He keeps putting music out and gives me new reasons to appreciate what he does.
So I'm going to ask you a question real quick.
Yeah.
I don't want to break your train of thought, which that's basically my job, is to break people's train of thought. So as far as banjo players go, all right, I've had I put my ears in with bluegrass a little bit too, and I've had a lot of conversations with bluegrass players. One guy I can think of in particular is a guy named Gary Payne.
Yeah.
Love Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I actually asked him a lot of questions about his ideas about Bela, and they weren't quite as
Yeah.
they wouldn't line up with yours.
Yes.
Why is there a controversy there with Bela Fleck? I need to know.
Well, you kind of have two different types of people, and this is a big generalization. So not everybody fits neatly into this category. But you could say this with rock, you could say it with jazz, all sorts of genres, is you have people that love and respect the tradition of a certain genre of music.
Right.
Bluegrass has a really rich American history of Earl Scruggs. You've got the Bluegrass Album Band with J.D. Crowe. You have people like Lonesome River Band, Sammy Sheeler, and Jim Mills with Ricky Skaggs, and all these guys that add their own kind of unique flavor, but still respect that it sounds like good old bluegrass. Even if they're doing unique things, kind of pushing the envelope, you can clearly tell that it's bluegrass music.
They're maintaining the genre.
They're maintaining the
Right.
genre. They're
I see what you're saying.
they're carrying that tradition,
Right.
and it's a tradition that should be kept.
Yeah.
And you could say that with jazz. As many contemporary guys that are pushing the envelope and doing weird things and unique things and trying to just be as creative as they can. There's a place for that. And there's also a place for good classic trad jazz. That it hits differently, when you're listening to it.
Right.
And both of those things are great, but they're not the same.
Okay. So you're saying he's kind of an instrument innovator as opposed to...
Yeah, so Bela, I would not call him a bluegrass musician. I would call him a banjo player, which means he plays every genre under the sun, but uses the banjo to do it.
So let's go back to where you were answering the question. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure we clarify that. So go ahead.
So the reason I love people like Bela Fleck, you may also be familiar with Chris Thiele, who's an amazing mandolin player from Nickel Creek, but has gone on to do a million different things, is these guys don't fit into a genre, but they take an instrument that's kind of been identified with a genre, and they try to say, okay, this is my instrument. How can I play all the different types of music I love with this particular instrument that has kind of been cubbyholed into a genre?
Right.
So when you think of a banjo, you think bluegrass music. You think country, Appalachian folk music. And the people that I really love who play the banjo have taken that instrument out of that stereotype and have played incredible jazz music. Bela, he just won another, I forget what number it is, instrumental jazz album with the late Chick Corea. And so he can hold his own in the jazz world. He's won Grammys in classical music. But what I appreciate about that is not feeling like your instrument and a particular genre are tied together. If you think about, I don't know, an accordion or maybe a penny whistle, you might think polka music, you might think Irish music, which there's good Irish music, there's good polka music, but that doesn't mean that those instruments have to stay there. And so one motivating factor for me as a banjo player is to say, how can I take this instrument that's thought of as this one thing, and what can I do to fit it into this other environment, to a jazz, to a blues, to reggae, to how can I, use this particular instrument to create something new in a genre that might catch people off guard. And I really appreciate musicians that push the envelope. And I mean, believe me, I love traditional bluegrass as much as the next guy. And there are amazing players out there that just do that one thing, but do it better than most anybody else. But I really appreciate someone that takes their instruments and just likes to play music, good music, which doesn't mean any particular genre. It's just good.
That's an interesting answer. Thank you for that.
So, yeah.
Let's move on to one more song here. Stephen, you sent Big River, and would you like to talk about the the ensemble here? And
Yeah, that's my good friend Brad Edwardson, who was here in the scene here in Charleston. Red Cedar Review was one of his bands.
It's a good band.
Yeah,
with Aaron Firetag.
Aaron
right?
Firetag, who's out West Coast these days, but hopefully, I'm sure he'll find his way back here at some point. Brad's down in St. Augustine, but we've been trying to put together a little duo project, concentrating on folk, bluegrassy kind of stuff. And this is a tune we actually recorded here in this room. I'm playing upright bass, he's playing guitar, and we're both singing. And yeah, it's old. I mean, Johnny Cash recorded this song, right?
Right.
I don't know all the roots to this song, but it's been recorded by a lot of people. Big River. And so this is just our take on this tune.
Okay, here it comes, Big River.
I taught that weeping willow how to cry, cry, cry. I showed them clouds how to cover up a clear blue sky. And the tears I cried for that woman gonna flood you, Big River. Well, I'm gonna sit right here until I die. Now I met her accidentally in St. Paul, Minnesota, and it tore me up every time I heard her drawl, southern drawl. Then I heard my dream was back downstream, cavorting in Davenport. I followed you, Big River, when you called. And I taught that weeping willow how to cry, cry, cry. I showed them clouds how to cover up a clear blue sky. And the tears I cried for that woman gonna flood you, Big River. Well, I'm gonna sit right here until I die. Take me to St. Louis later on down the river. Well, a freighter said she's been here, but she's gone, boy, she's gone. Found her trail in Memphis, but she just walked up the block, raised a few eyebrows, and she went on down alone. And I taught that weeping willow how to cry, cry, cry. I showed them clouds how to cover up a clear blue sky. And the tears I cried for that woman gonna flood you, Big River. I'm gonna sit right here until I die. Battered down by Baton Rouge, River Queen rolling on. Well, take that woman on down to New Orleans, New Orleans. Go on now, I've had enough. Won't you dump my blues down in the Gulf? She loves you, Big River, more than me. And I taught that weeping willow how to cry, cry, cry. I showed them clouds how to cover up a clear blue sky. And the tears I cried for that woman gonna flood you, Big River. Well, I'm gonna sit right here until I die. Now the tears I cried for that woman gonna flood you, Big River. I'm gonna sit right here until I die.
All right, and we're back. Some final thoughts, guys, before we get out of here about the Charleston music scene as it exists. Some things we could do to improve it, some things that we could say to uplift it. What do you think?
I think we have probably one of the healthiest music scenes in the country. As far as I've experienced, I'm sure there's some other pockets with some great scenes all over the place, but I think we definitely have something special here. The way we all support each other. I would love to see this town have a listening room, a true listening room. I know economically, financially, it's a tough sell, and I know that's one of the reasons, especially with how expensive real estate is these days, of why it's never happened. It's, you have to find a specific crowd to support you to do that. But there are some towns that have some really good working listening rooms.
How many people are like max people, like 100, 150?
Yeah, probably something like that. I mean, Joe Clark's done a great job with the Forte Jazz Lounge, which is sort of that, but it's kind of geared towards jazz. It'd be cool to have a space that's a little more, accepting to jazz, folk, the whole gamut, but a place where people would come and sit and enjoy the music, have it be music first. Like, we are so blessed that Charleston loves its live music when it comes to club gigs, to corporate stuff, to, people just like to be outside and listen to music. And it's a great, compliment to our lives, a great way to bring some more beauty and happiness to the world. But that's the only thing I would really love to have a listening room.
What about you, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, going off that, we live in such a scenic place, where tons of weddings happening every single weekend because there's tons of beautiful marsh and river properties. So, I feel like myself and a lot of other musicians play a lot of corporate gigs, a lot of weddings, a lot of that sort of thing. But yeah, having opportunities as musicians to be creative sometimes is lacking. Because sometimes you need an opportunity to give you need a venue or a festival or something to give you the opportunity to be creative, but it's kind of a chicken or egg type thing because you kind of need to have a product that you can offer them as well, and it's kind of this back and forth, which I don't know if there's an easy solution to that. But yeah, I'm in a lot of bands where it's kind of like, the guy will call up different people. Hey, you available? Yes, no. They piece together a band. You show up, you do the gig, and that's part of the work, and that's great. And you kind of learn on the fly. But sometimes what happens is you kind of get used to that like fight or flight mentality of just kind of, I just have to play well enough to get through the next gig, instead of actually thinking like, how can we pull together a group of musicians to be really intentional about the art that we're making instead of just, make the client happy.
Right.
And that's not an easy solution. It takes a lot of work on the back end to be able to do something like that. But I would love to see more of that intentionally artistic, energy going to that. Not as much
money in the art.
No,
it's the tough, and that's the chicken for the egg. And now with this marketing age we're in, where it's like, if you want to start a band, I need video. I need a Instagram page with how many followers you have. I need all these things instead of being like, here's a picture we took in the backyard, like in the olden days.
Right. Here's a CD. We sound like this.
And it's like, we're going to come play the gig and create a vibe and try to bring some community, And now it's like, you got to do all that stuff too.
And a lot of the gigs around here, I will say, and this is not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It's just because we're a wedding venue place, where we're surrounded by beauty, that a lot of the work for musicians down here are ambiance gigs. Is you're there to create a certain feeling. If you're a bluegrass band, if you're a jazz band, you're there to make the vibe feel jazzy and upscale, or you're playing at Oyster Roast and you're there to be kind of fun Southern hospitality vibe, to where a lot of times it's
part of a package we're selling, kind of.
It's part of the package.
An image that we're trying to perpetuate.
You're selling you're selling a certain feeling, and certain bands offer a feeling to your event instead of, what are the songs actually saying and doing and the orchestration, So I find that interesting. Again, not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the line of, in Charleston, that's the way our line of work is.
All right. Guys, we're going to have to leave it at that. Is that all right? All right. Thanks to you both for setting aside some time to talk with us today. Thanks to everyone out there listening. Take a good friend and see a show, buy a t-shirt, grab a sticker. Please don't forget to share good music with other people. We'll be back in with another show in 2 weeks. Goodbye for now.
Thanks for having us.